Hi everybody, welcome to this R&D Unplugged number 14. We're glad to have here Carina Castagna on a topic that is very exciting, why we fear the ugly food. Carina, over to you.
Thank you, Shahab. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Carina Castagna, and I would like us to explore what happened at the intersection of beauty, waste, and our brain, and how we can change it, how we can unlearn it. This is a story about sustainability, but also about perception. It's about what we throw away, not only from our plates, but also from our mind, and how education can help us see it differently. So let's play a brain game. Here are two choices that you should make. Imagine you are in a rush, in a busy time in the supermarket, and you need to choose this beautiful strawberry and the other one that is oddly shaped. Which one looks safer?
Right.
Right? Which one would you eat first? The perfect? The odd?
That's odd.
You're biased because you know that. Yes, so most people instinctively choose the pretty one, not because it tastes better, but because our brain is programmed to think that the beauty is safe and the ugly is risky, it's uncommon, it's unfamiliar. That instinct was super useful back in the days for our survival, for our brain flee or fight, but now it's driving something far more dangerous, which is the massive global food waste. And this is what our talk of today. So today I brought you a visual story. So before we get into data, I would like you to think about the scene. So it's evening in Paris and the market just closed. The sellers have packed up. A few people walk quietly between the empty stalls. They are not shopping, they are picking up what was left behind. The imperfect fruit and vegetables, crooked carrots, soft apples, food that didn't sell because of aesthetics reasons. For them, this food is survival. This food means dinner. So Agnes Varda, last week I went to her exposition actually, which is closer to here, and Agnes Varda is a director, a French director. In her exposition, I saw pictures of heart-shaped potatoes, like in this presentation, and also people that were picking up the ugly potatoes, like in a survival mode, right? And she called these people the silent witness of exclusion, proof of how our system falls both food and people. What Varda does so beautifully is to reveal the emotional and cultural blindness behind our food waste, behind waste. What beauty and worth go unseen, simply because we are taught and we have been taught to ignore it. So Agnes Varda, she invited us to witness the contrast between abundance and exclusion. And it's a really smart documentary. I really recommend you. And she also celebrates what is discarded, because when you see an ugly fruit, this is not risky, it's not contaminated. Most of those fruit and vegetables, they have a low index of pesticides, which means that they are ugly fruits and vegetables because they are natural. So it is their natural form, the natural format of them, right? This reveals then a prehistoric instinct. and it's a modern waste. So my research explored how we can start to unlearn this bias and to rewrite how we see and how we value this type of food. So 1/3 of food is produced. One food that is produced is lost or wasted every year. That includes produce rejected for aesthetic reasons, such as a carrot with 2 legs, imperfect and uncommon. What if I told you that this rejection is less about a rational brain and a rational decision-making as consumers, but more about our subconscious shortcuts from our brain, or instinct and that our brain relies on? At the same time, 2.33 billion people faced moderate to severe food insecurity in 2023. Nearly 29% of the humanity. These reflect a systemic failure, not just in logistics and infrastructure, but in perception and as well in education. This important gap became then the start of my academic journey. So from my PhD in Portugal and CUNY in New York, my research has been driven by a simple but powerful question. Why does our brain still waste food? What began as a curiosity, I brought to evidence on different universities. I run experiments in Portugal, in New York. I also participate in living labs in Amsterdam and teaching food security and neuroscience in Wageningen. So behavior science applied to sustainability. And I also did my postdoc in Cologne, where I analyzed how our brain reacts to aesthetics as well. So Cologne, we have a Bonn University colleague here, so I'm happy. So since then, I've continued asking me this question and looking for evidence on sustainability. And now, I would like to bring you a study that I call Beauty is Good, Ugly is Risky, Food Aesthetic Bias and Control Level. Because the real question isn't just why we waste, it's how we can unlearn it. And even more, how we can teach others to go into this way, to teach others to see what is the reality and see that our heuristics sometimes get us to make unsustainable habits, right? So why are we involved to fear the ugly? This fear of imperfection isn't superficial, it's biological. And our ancestors avoided the oddly shaped food because those were often signs of contamination, of risk, and we didn't evolve in supermarkets. For our ancestors, food that looked strange and like heart-shaped potato, they often was seen as dangerous. And this was okay in the prehistorical era, right? But nowadays we need to unlearn to trust beauty and to trust only beauty. We need to start learning how to love ugly fruits and vegetables and diminish our food waste. So, as you can see, we don't consciously reject ugly fruit and vegetables. Our brain does it for us automatically. This is an implicit response. What are implicit responses? So they are fast, emotional, and unconscious. It's triggered by heuristics, a mental shortcut, like ugly means unsafe, beauty is safe. These are implicit responses that involved to protect us. So in our ancestral environments, quick and automatic reactions like deciding where to fight or flee were essential for survival. So this fast and intuitive brain we call system one. The psychologists like Kahneman call system one. We make decisions fast based on previous experience. And the system two is slow, it's analytical, right? It takes time to think, and for instance, a huge mathematical problem, really complicated. So then we activate the system two. But the majority of our decisions, especially in a busy life, in a life that is overloaded with different stimuli, we use mostly our system one, our fast and automatic brain. That allows us to react to threats without conscious deliberation. So they make our life easier in a way, guiding billions of decisions as consumers that are busy. But when the shortcut is wrong, it leads to waste, it leads to food waste, and also to choices like using lots of plastics and many topics that we could discuss further in sustainability, right? So to change minds and to reach the subconscious, I use the nudges and neuroscience in order to change these shortcuts, to change or system one fast brain. Because most food education talks to our rational brain, talks to our system two. And what psychologists, they call, well, we teach rules. This is good, this is bad, don't do this, don't do that. Most of the people do this, so follow them. So this is more irrational. You're talking to a cognitive side of your brain, your system two. But mostly of our choices are made in seconds, are made with our system one, fast and emotional. So if we want to unlearn food waste, we have to nudge people to focus on changing their system one fast brain responses. So the nuts, they do this. Nuts, they shift how we behave in the sense that is not irrational, but in the sense that is emotional and fast, right? It architects our behavior. So we need to change their implicit and automatic responses in order to create a new sustainable habit. And how nuts help us to unlearn? By rewriting the intuitive mind. Nuts don't demand attention. They architect our behavior by changing our system one and our automatic brain. So my research shows that people reject suboptimal fruits and vegetables, not because they feel unsafe, but because their brains involved to spot dangers when they see the ugly and risky. So this is a common heuristics, let's put it like this. Since our prehistorical brain, we see ugly as danger and as contaminated. That's where most everyday choices happen, including food waste. And here I brought some tips of books from Daniel Kahneman and Nudge that talks exactly about this. And I think it's really important because it's not just about food waste, but in your general daily life choices, how we can make ourselves as a better consumers, better citizens, right? And not just make in a rush choices. And this, I think, would construct and would build a better way to live. So the real question became, which is, can we overcome the food aesthetic bias in order to influence sustainable behavior? So the goal of our first study was to prove that when we look to these ugly shaped I don't see ugly anymore, okay? But I'm biased, of course. After so many experiments that we ran 6 experiments. I love those beautifully oddly shaped carrots and vegetables and fruits. But okay, we showed in a laboratory in New York. I was doing my PhD back in the days on CUNY. And we showed in New York and also in Portugal. So we used the European and American consumers. And they were exposed to different pictures of food. Ugly food, perfect food. And we tested whether ugly legs, like these carrots, they trigger a subconscious risk in these people, right? And how we measure this? We measured using eye tracking and EEG, and we saw that these visual cues actually were activating an automatic avoidance of ugly fruits and vegetables. And as you can see here, there is a higher fixation point when they see the ugly carrots in comparison with the beautiful high aesthetics carrots. And we also not measured only the fixation, but we measured the pupillometry. So the pupillometry, when it's dilated, we measured for each participant and compare it between the two types of foods. When it's dilated, it's a proxy of risk. So we had these to prove. It was a really interesting experiment because, of course, we also noted the qualitative test. So what do you think about this carrot? So they thought, oh, it's GMO, right? It's not organic, but actually it's the contrary. Actually, when the food is oddly shaped, it's more natural because it's how the nature is. Nature is not perfect. It is perfect, not perfect. So beauty is good, ugly is risky. We have this answer, but now how to shift? We just don't want to just observe, right? We want to shift this behavior. So how we shift? So back in the discussion, we have nuts, we have heuristics, and we have nuts to change the heuristics, to change our fast reaction, right? So we used and we applied nuts, different nuts, using a theory that we call control level. Here is where nuts come in. So it's a well-placed question, a meaningful label, even a story. These are not just tools of communications. They are nuts that shift perception and behavior and boost our intrinsic behavior. So for our experiments, we chose the control level, which assumes that the same product, the same object can be represented at different levels. For instance, let's take this mug, right? So this mug, as you can see, it's concretely a mug. If I go closer, and in my abstract way, I can see that's a beautiful lion and with green details. And I would like this one. You know, so that is the abstract view and the concrete view. And we can have both regions, but with different, so I can be more abstract and it can be more concrete. Or for different topics, we can have different perceptions as well. For art, I can be more abstract, but for my daily choices in the supermarket, I will be really concrete. So this is a theory in psychology that led us to understand how people consider objects and events as distant and proximal, as here and there, as you and me, and psychological distant or proximal. So we used this nudge through the construal, and we operated this on 6 experiments. So according to the control level, the same object can be seen differently, as I just gave the example of the mug, depending on psychological distance. And this, trust me, can change the behavior. Because when you nudge, for instance, for public health, you can nudge on public health and educate consumers using these psychological tricks that in my case, I use the control level, abstract versus concrete, to change the words, and your brain will automatically behave in a different way. And for instance, the concrete control increases the perception of risk, especially for low aesthetic food. So when you are in a concrete mindset, your risk will be higher. In the contrary, when you are in an abstract control, so when you are distant, when you see the object behind the object, why this object is there, it's more general, it's not so detailed. So this reduces the risk perception and increase the acceptance. So in our study, we use the abstract in different ways. We manipulated in campaigns, we printed advertisements with different abstract and controlled verbal communication. And we saw this difference in many studies. But I will explain better in the following slides because it is a little bit complex. So we predicted that the increase of the abstractness can facilitate the evaluation of what is behind the aesthetics of suboptimal product, such as waste reduction and sustainable habits. So when you have an abstract mindset, you won't see the ugly fruit as ugly, right? And your risk perception will diminish. So in total, we run 60 studies to understand and reduce aesthetic bias into decisions. The first, exploring the risk perception using eye tracking, and then we focus on how control level can change this perception of risk. We manipulated this mindset of control level using different nodes in different ways. So in these 6 experiments, we applied this theory of control level, abstract versus concrete, using, for instance, asking the participants on a lab, why do you focus on your mental health versus how do you focus on your mental health? So these differences of words, it's priming you an abstract versus a concrete behavior, right? Also on images and context. And finally, we tested it both in the lab and also we went to a supermarket, El Corte Inglés in Spain and Portugal, and we tested the same theory of concrete and abstract. So I will show you today just 2 experiments. This selected study 2, we tested the moderation of control level and the risk perception. How many minutes we have? Okay. So the design of this experiment was testing concrete versus abstract versus food aesthetics, low versus high, between subjects design. So 202 participants based in America, they participated in this study. And the goal was to investigate how control level influences the consumption of the low aesthetics food, so of the ugly food. How we manipulated the abstract versus concrete. So in this particular study, we adapted from Fujik et al. We asked the participants to write a task. So imagine you're writing a story. So we actually asked them, please write this story. And I will ask you, I will divide this class into, so this group will have an abstract mindset, and this other group will have a concrete mindset. And we asked the same story. So write about your mental health. But for the abstract condition, we asked it to explain why, abstract why, they should try to maintain their mental health. And participants in the concrete condition, we asked them to write a story about how they might, they should improve their mental health. So the difference here were just 2 words, just 2 words. And this is replicated in the empirical articles all over the world, right? This concrete and abstract manipulation. So this was our first manipulation of control level. After you wrote your story, your first group about abstract and this concrete, you already have a mindset on abstract and a mindset on concrete. This will turn in your brain more or less at a maximum 5-10 minutes, okay? But we induced this mindset on you. We primed abstract versus concrete mindset on you. And now you are looking the world with your abstract or concrete mindset. So the result here is that control level moderates the influence of food aesthetics on risk behavior. When you have a concrete mindset, the group with the concrete mindset, they had a higher risk perception of low food aesthetics. So concrete mindset participants had higher risk. And the abstract, it annihilated the effect of risk. So the group that had the abstract mindset wasn't perceiving the ugly food as risky. This is one of the studies, right? But we run other studies using different types of manipulation of control level, and we received the same result, or the abstract diminished. One of the studies, the abstract diminished the risk perception. In this study here, it had no effect on risk perception, which means the abstract was realizing the ugly fruits and vegetables as the same risk as a beautiful food. Actually, last year in Wageningen, we also ran an experiment with plastics. So we were on a festival, Lowlands, in the Netherlands, and in one group one day we were exposing posts with why, and in another day we were exposing posts with how, right? Like priming abstract and concrete. And then we saw this behavior on plastic waste. So if they were putting the plastic glasses on the rice bin, right, and how was the behavior regarding plastic? So this, and it was the same result. With the abstract mindset, they were more conscious about the plastic waste in this case. So how to increase consumers' acceptability? We were worried about, okay, how can we adapt this to the reality, right? How can we adapt to different reality? So this time, we took the research into the real world, and we selected a grocery store, a major grocery store in Portugal, which is a Spanish company, El Corte Inglés. And we partnered with them in Portugal to observe the real consumer behavior. So the question was, can simple labels, simple certificates like organic label change how people respond to ugly food? We tested two types of products. The first one was the processed food like a soup made of ugly fruits and vegetables or a juice. And this is abstract. And the unprocessed food, so the ugly fruits and vegetables in their natural form, like fresh carrots or apples, which are the concrete position. And we also looked at whether shoppers noticed the organic label or not. So would that label and that cue of quality and safety make people more willing to buy ugly fruits and vegetables? So what we saw is that label actually works. So when the food was in its natural form, when it was concrete, and consumers noticed the organic label, they were much more purchases. when they saw the ugly fruits and vegetables with the organic label. So which means here that when it's in a concrete form, an ugly food with organic label will reduce the risk perception, which means education, information, it truly works, right? So, but for processed food like soups and juices made with ugly fruits and vegetables, the organic label were the same. So if it was organic or if it was a normal food processed with ugly fruits and vegetables, the purchases were the same. So here, what's the information of this experiment is that when we have different oddly shaped fruits and vegetables, the labels like the GMO, no GMO or organic labels, they will increase the purchases and reduce the risk perception of these consumers. We also tested lemonade in the School of Portugal. We did a lemonade day with the students. This study, because at the time I didn't add it here, but it was a laboratorial study with the students in Portugal, and we exposed them to abstract advertisements and concrete advertisements. And then they had to choose if they want to drink the lemonade made with ugly lemons or not. And we did it in different days, right? 4 different days in the canteen. So the result was also the same. So concrete, the acceptance of the lemonade was diminished when comparison with the abstract. So how we see shapes how we waste. And here I'm going to the finalization of the presentation. But I would like to pass you a message that we often think education is about informing minds, but sometimes it's about retraining our instincts and reshaping our instincts. So, which is relearning, right? So my research shows that people reject ugly fruits and vegetables not because they are unsafe, but because our brain is programmed to see ugly as danger. But it's also changeable. This is the good news. So our instincts, our intrinsic responses, and how our heuristic works, it can change, can be changeable and architected by nudging, by educating in a different way, not focusing on the rational mind. So through nudges, seeing the bigger why behind choices, we can reshape how people respond. Not just how they think, but what they see. So education is not just about learning facts. It's about learning to see differently. And I think this is the main message here, right? To question the biases of our society and to reconnect ethics, aesthetics, and sustainability. We don't just need new policies, we need new perceptions, we need new ways to learn and to share the knowledge, right, with the society. And that begins not in the supermarket, but in the classroom, in my opinion, and in the universities. It's not just about ignorance on our habits of sustainability. Well, we are wasting food, we are bad consumers. But it's not just a rational informational thing. It's something that it's biological. So we need different answers, different types of educations to trigger our instincts and not just our frontal lobe, not just our cognitive brain, right? So education must trigger this perception and not just knowledge. And cultivate curiosity, reduce shame, and reframe what quality means. That's the importance here. This is also about global justice, right? Because while we are wasting food, people are passing through hunger. And it's important to see things in a different way and to to pick up different solutions for wicked problems in our society, especially nowadays with climate change and sustainability. So here is a new mission for education. We should integrate food literacy and behavior science together, encourage abstract thinking to challenge gut ideas, and move from rote facts to reflective perception. For policymakers, promote food systems education that includes as well neurobehavioral insights like public campaigns, public health campaigns, focusing on in our instincts, in your automatic brain. And for all of us to stop teaching that beauty is value, to design learning environments like this one that normalize the imperfection, that increase the cooperation, the co-creation. And remember, how we teach perception is how we shape the future. Thank you, everyone.
Questions for Carina? Eric?
Hello.
I was wondering if putting a little organic sign on a vegetable or fruit is really a nudge. You consider that it's a whole different class of product. Like organic food is usually much more valuable. The price is different. Don't buy it for the same, even for the same recipe. Sometimes if you feel, so do you consider really this is a nudge or this is
The labels?
Yeah.
Labels are a nudge. Labels are architecting behavior. So even there was an experiment that with the green label of organic, people were not even reading, and sometimes your brain were also mistaken because if you see the green label, you think that it's organic, then you change your behavior. So there was some experiments as well on this. But nuts are labels are considered and certifications are considered as nudge as well. Yes, because you can, why? Because this can boost your fast answer towards a decision, right? If you see, there is also a paper, Health Hello, from the Action Law. So if you have a Coke, for instance, and the Coke will do a super natural product, but you see that it's from Coke, then you won't buy. The same is the contrary, right? So brands can be also nuts, right? It will boost your fast behavior. It will serve as a hint on in your brain. So why do you think it's not?
Because sometimes with an organic product is like twice more considered the same product, so you know that. So okay, it's a nudge, but it's a nudge. Like you make an informed decision.
Yeah.
You think that this is a much higher quality product because you're buying organic.
Exactly.
So for me, you're buying two different things, but not the same product.
I see your point. Yeah. But nuts are considered, labels are considered nudge because it will activate your fast decision. So, like for instance, in France, the Action Law from Sorbonne, he created the ABCDEF nudge score, right?
Yeah.
This is a nudge. And you will see fast. At least I'm in a rush in the supermarket and I see the green A. Okay, this is my decision, sometimes. So this is a way to play with your system one and not make your system two think so much. Yeah, so certifications and labels are considered by the academic as nuts.
In some cases, people will make here a conscious decision that I will only buy organic, for example. That would be my case, for example. So it won't, in my case, I guess it won't be a nudge, it will be a decision to buy organic from the start. So
then we go deeper. Yes, then it's also even a self-image, right? So this is even a self-image, a self-personality. Well, I'm an organic buyer, right? So this is also a really interesting topic. But for sure, it's more complex. But in terms of decision making, labels don't think about the organ, but the labels are used as nuts, right? But I understood now your question. You can see, like in my city in Brazil, we have lots of pests in Brazil, so lots of non-organic food. And people who goes to the supermarket, that organic supermarket, they are like a community. So they're really a community. So that's the point that you just mentioned, right? I see myself as an organic buyer, right? And this is an act of politics, consumption, political consumption, right? So this goes deeper to on identity as well, self-perception, and all these theories that I also like. But I see your point.
Other questions?
Yes, thanks for the inspiring talk. I have two questions. One more general. You mentioned 1/3 of the food is wasted, and I was wondering whether one knows at which stage this waste is done, and whether you see that nudges or incentives, motivations can be very different, whether they are applied to production or to consumption.
Yeah,
And
this is a good question.
So the second question, I have in a way an abstract mindset, and I would like to understand a little bit more in detail your experiment. So you divided the class in two, and you hint or somehow you produce this temporary mindset. And then once that food comes into the picture, I did not understand. Do they have to pick? Do they have to eat? Do they have to cook? What do they have to do? They have to buy? I don't know.
Of course. So I will start with this question, okay? When let's imagine that it's actually two experiments in one. Why? Because we don't want the control level to bias directly the food habit. So we didn't mention food at all. We mentioned mental health in one study, and we mentioned sport behavior in another study. Why this? Because we don't want them to bias them to focus on health, right? We want just to focus on the abstract. So when you are designing any experiment, it's better to just focus on the manipulation in another topic, right? Because you want to create a crime of abstract and concrete. Doesn't matter the food here. So it's a difference here. It's okay, you have the abstract versus concrete. And now let's go to see different consumer behavior choices. I don't know if it makes sense, but we don't want to make them think about food prior to the real decision making. Because then it will create a rationalization of their answers. And we want to target the intrinsic response. So, okay, this group has the abstract mindset, this group has the concrete mindset, let's do our choices, let's do our decision making. It makes sense for you, I can explain it in different ways, that's all.
Well, there are some parts that are missing. So when is that this risk is measured, for example?
Okay, so then you have the manipulation, right? This is the idea. This is the independent variable, which means it's not impacted. You create a mindset, right? So this is your independent variable. This will impact on your dependent variable that will be measured. The manipulation is not measured. The manipulation is primed. It can be primed with a movie, with a story, with a writing test. But you then need to test how your manipulation will affect your DV. How your manipulation will affect your dependent variable that in my case would you purchase the purchase intentions plus risk perception. So you have different scales that you can use, right? I will give you another example. You want to study fear versus joy. So you prime one group with fear and you prime one group with joy using thrillers, using comedy movies. Okay? And then you will test how they do their health health purchases in a pharmacy, for instance, or how they buy in the internet. So it's not connected, but you induce a part in your brain, and then you ask and measure different states, different behaviors. So in this case, I measure risk perception, and I measure purchase intentions, right?
By question.
I use Qualtrics questionnaire. Because Qualtrics, if you're interested in that, use Qualtrics for experiments, because you can randomize different manipulations. But we can go deeper into that. It's one of my favorite methodologies, but I believe also that we need to use secondary data and qualitative research, not only experiments, right? And about the food waste and loss. So when you have food waste, is the consumption side, is the sphere of consumer. So it's the waste that is made after the supermarket, right? After the supermarket, from the consumer side. So when the supermarket is also buying from producers, it's also the waste, right? But the loss is from the supply chain, the production to the supply chain. And then there is an interesting fact that us, in a developed country, Europe, we have more waste or loss.
And what?
What do you think? In Europe, we have more waste or loss of food. Imagine, the waste is consumption. Loss is the supply chain. Do you think in Europe we have more waste or loss of food?
So I think it's more like.
No, it's in the developed countries, it's more on the waste in the consumption side. We have more power to buy food, to make more choices, and then we go to the supermarket, sometimes we buy more than we want, even, right? So FAO just submitted a report that the European countries and North America as well, the waste is higher than the loss. And countries like in Brazil, I don't know how are the dates right now, but countries of Brazil that are in development, my country, we have low technology on farms, for instance. We are developing this technology, and then we have more food loss in the supply chain and production. It's more even in the supply chain, because we use trucks, for instance, and not trains, and we don't have the technology to do this supply chain. At least in the past. I need to see how the data is now. But just for you to understand and to picture that the food loss and waste are different, right? And this paper was focused on waste, on food waste.
Final question?
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I think it was super inspiring and interesting. I have a more maybe practical question now, because you said you have to kind of teach it, you have to relearn it. And the topic is taught in school, sustainability and also consumption. But what I was asking myself, are there any materials already actually to use in school? Because for teachers it's always difficult now. How do I teach this? How do I do, based on these results from the research, to really trigger this relearning in my classroom? So is there already anything that can be used, or do you have a recommendation how to include now this nudging actually in our classrooms?
I don't know about educational materials, but I already saw campaigns in school, not only food targeting food waste, but different issues like water waste, mostly. So they were using nuts with focusing on the system one brain, right? But this is an important question. I'm not so quite sure if they are adapting the education towards this side. And you're writing a kid's book, you know? I forgot it. But this is important, and I think that if it's not, I hope it is, but if not, it should be in the schools for sure.
I think it's interesting to how to maybe, include some little tricks here and there in the daily classroom. So,
Yeah.
Sure,
It's not really a question, it's just, I just heard a talk about nudges, and the talk was my grudges with nudges. So it was an ethicist, and he was like asking about the advocacy of nudging, because it's like paternalism, and you somehow induce a behavior, and do you have the right to do that? So is there any question in your research, like about this ethics of nudging?
This is when I present nudging topics to my students in Wageningen, also in Cologne. That was the first question that they were making. And it made me reflect about that, but if you use for politics side in a bad way, we need to use as well the sustainability side to induce the good behavior, because this tool is used. Are we going to use, and is used in political messages and campaigns, and then we are not going to use in sustainability? So it's an open discussion, you know? But in my opinion, it's a tool that is important, because we need to really learn how to do fast choices. And with low cognitive power, when we are busy, we do the wrong decision sometimes, right? So I think it's important, in my opinion. But this is an open discussion, and it is an important discussion, though.
I think it was really interesting because they differentiated between social nudging and green nudging and political nudging. So I think that might be a way to somehow solve this.
And then be careful, there is the greenwashing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe a final question from me then. I can't help but take your talk as a metaphor for discrimination in general. Can you give us a hint about how this research would translate to discrimination against humans? I assume it goes way beyond visual cues only. And can we nudge people not to discriminate?
Not to discriminate and to be authentic, right? So I wasn't thinking to go into this topic, but what is the topic of my children's book?
Okay, tell us a few words about this book.
It's not about discrimination per se and directly, but it's about a child that was feeling discriminated, and she felt that she didn't belong anywhere, right? And because she was not maybe perfect, as the society put as perfection, right? So she was feeling odd, like these fruits and vegetables. So she went with her grandfather to this farm market, and she entered in a magical world where there was beautiful, ugly fruits and vegetables, and also children that were like painting abstract arts, children that were with different shapes, different sizes, and she felt connected. She felt embraced, and when she came back to the real world, she realized that she needs to be her. There is a space to her to be who she is, even if she feels different, right? Because authenticity is everything. And respect the differences, it's so important, especially nowadays with so many inclusion and injustice in the world. So, yeah. So this is more or less about my book, and it's nowadays under review in the Netherlands. And yeah.
I'll ask you more about it during the podcast. Thanks, everybody. I think this is it. Thank you for the invitation. It was really nice.